Darkness, panicked glances, a tense whisper, muffled arguments. In the dead of night, a man and a woman nervously stuff something heavy into the trunk of their car, tightly wrapped in plastic. Their hushed voices carry fear as they anxiously glance around, terrified that someone might see or hear them. Little do they know, this disturbing scene will soon dominate headlines across Florida. Inside that thick black plastic wrapping is the lifeless body of 16-year-old Miranda Corsette, a teenage girl who was just looking for a bit of attention, warmth, and support. Instead, Miranda fell into the trap of people she should never have trusted. Miranda Corsette was born in the small town of Gulfport, Florida. At just 16, she'd already faced more hardships than most people experience in a lifetime. Miranda lost both of her parents at an early age, leaving her grandmother to raise her alone. These early tragedies deeply impacted Miranda, leading her down a troubled path. She began struggling with mental health issues, experimenting with drugs, and frequently running away from home, becoming well known to Gulfport police, who regularly received calls from her worried grandmother, hoping each disappearance would end safely. Despite all her struggles, Miranda had a strong reason to hold on to life. At 16, she was already a young mother to an 11-month-old baby. It was for him that she tried to change, though doing so was not easy. In February 2025, Miranda ran away from home again. Her grandmother hoped it was just another short disappearance, like before. But when February 24th came and went with no sign of her return, she knew. This time, something was seriously wrong. After Miranda vanished, her cousin, Deneen Wetton, took to Facebook 3 times, desperately trying to get the public and police to pay attention. She claimed authorities weren't making her disappearance a priority because of Miranda's so-called troubled past. Her family feared the worst, that she had fallen victim to human trafficking or exploitation. But sadly, they had no idea just how horrifying the truth would turn out to be. The investigation moved fast. On March 6th, 2025, a witness came forward with shocking information: a possible kidnapping and murder. Police took the tip seriously right away. It was about Miranda Corsette, a missing teen who had already been gone for over a week. As is often the case in stories like this, 2 adults entered Miranda Corsette's life. People she trusted without question. 35-year-old Steven Gress and his 37-year-old partner, Michelle Brandes, seemed like an ordinary couple from St. Petersburg. Just 2 people inviting a teenager into their home. But behind that normal facade lurked a horrifying truth. Steven Gress is the prime suspect in this case. He was the one who first reached out to Miranda on social media, persistently convincing her to meet him in person. To a 16-year-old girl, a man nearly 20 years older might have seemed mature, responsible, someone she could feel safe with. But to police, Gress was already a familiar name. He had a long history of run-ins with the law, drugs, aggressive behavior. This wasn't his first time on their radar. On February 14th, Gress made his move. He drove to Gulfport, picked up Miranda, and spent the entire day with her at his home in St. Petersburg. He even brought her back home that night, building trust, making her feel safe. But the next day, when Miranda returned to him on her own, she walked straight into a trap. By February 20th, everything took a dark turn. A missing piece of jewelry sparked an argument, and Gress and Brandes accused Miranda of stealing. The tension quickly escalated into full-blown violence. Rage took over. According to police, from that day until February 24th, Miranda was relentlessly beaten and tortured. They demanded a confession for a crime she didn't commit. Investigators say Gress was the ringleader in the abuse, the one who took things too far. And when the torture reached its breaking point, he ended it in the most brutal way possible, forcing a billiard ball into her mouth, wrapping her face in plastic wrap. Realizing what they had done, Steven and Michelle knew they had to cover their tracks. They wrapped Miranda's body in plastic, loaded it into their car under the cover of darkness, and drove off into the night. Steven took the body to a house in Largo, his girlfriend's mother's home, She was out of town at the time, but her elderly grandmother, who was disabled, was still inside. There in the backyard, Steven and Michelle carried out the unthinkable. Police later found biological evidence, DNA confirming that this was where Miranda's body was dismembered. The killers weren't done yet. They took the remains to the city of Ruskin in Hillsborough County and dumped them in a trash container. This happened on Brandis's birthday. She had just turned 37 years old. The dumpster was found, but by then, the body had already been transported to the Resource Recovery Facility on Falkenberg Road in Tampa, Hillsborough County. The St. Petersburg Police Department received confirmation of the worst-case scenario. The remains of 16-year-old Miranda Corsette, who was brutally murdered and dismembered, were most likely destroyed at Hillsborough County's waste-to-energy plant, where trash is burned to produce electricity. Investigators are almost certain that Miranda's remains were incinerated long before the search even began. And that means the police have lost the most crucial piece of evidence: the victim's body. Now, the prosecution will have to prove the killer's guilt without it, relying only on the horrific evidence they left behind in the house, where Miranda was tortured and dismembered. By the time police received information about Miranda's disappearance, Steven was already in jail. On March 5th, he was arrested for assaulting his partner with a harpoon and drug possession. And just a few days later, the investigation led straight to him through the testimony of an anonymous informant. Police charged him with kidnapping and first-degree murder, and the moment of his arrest was even captured on surveillance cameras, shocking the entire city.
There was a lot of fighting always going on. Our landlord installed ring cameras for us, which we're very thankful for. That brought us a sense of safety, but definitely feeling safer now that he's off the streets. He was an intimidating fellow.
As for Michelle Brandes, her role in this tragedy is just as horrifying. As Steven Gress's common-law wife, she was there the entire time. Investigators are convinced that Brandes didn't just know about the crime. She actively participated in beating and torturing Miranda, helped cover up the murder, and was with Steven when he transported the dismembered remains of the young girl. After police issued a warrant for her arrest, Michelle went into hiding for several days. But under pressure from law enforcement, she turned herself in on March 8th and was immediately arrested for first-degree murder as an accomplice. The neighbors were shocked, but not surprised. David Horton, the owner of the house rented by Gress and Brandes, recalled that conflicts in the apartment had become a regular occurrence for everyone. Long before the tragedy, neighbors noticed strange and disturbing things happening in the couple's home. Starting in January 2025, St. Petersburg police were called to the couple's address at least 7 times following complaints from neighbors. Police call logs show multiple reports related to domestic disputes, aggressive behavior, welfare checks, incidents of domestic violence, and even assaults. However, despite all these calls being logged, none of them fell within the critical time frame between February 15th and February 24th, 2025, the period when Miranda Corsette was inside the home, enduring brutal torture. The closest police call came after her death, on February 25th, but when officers arrived, they found nothing suspicious. No one was home. It was a tragic coincidence, one that may have cost a young girl her life. Miranda was completely alone, trapped with 2 adults who were much older and stronger than her. She was utterly defenseless, a victim of their cruelty and inhuman indifference. Investigators have called this one of the most horrifying crimes in Florida's recent history, and now the public is anxiously waiting for the moment when these killers finally face justice in court. The truth about Miranda Corsette's final moments may forever remain buried, under tons of garbage or lost in the flames of the incinerator. Police admit that even under the best circumstances, the chances of recovering her remains are almost non-existent. Without this key piece of evidence, the court now faces a daunting challenge: delivering justice based only on the horrific fragments of truth found in the backyard of the Largo home and the grim evidence collected inside the killer's apartment. And as Steven Gress and Michelle Brandes sit behind bars awaiting trial, one crucial question remains: why did this happen? It's known that the couple was consumed by uncontrollable rage over a piece of jewelry they believed Miranda had stolen. But later, Police discovered that she never even had that fateful ring. It was found after her murder. She was killed over something she never did. Today, Miranda's 11-month-old son is left without a mother. One day, he will grow up asking why she never came home. The investigation is still ongoing, and the final chapter of this case remains unwritten. What really happened behind the closed doors of that house on 27th Avenue? The full truth may never come to light, but one thing is certain. This horrific crime will forever leave a scar in a city that failed to hear a desperate cry for help.